He had built an empire out of nothing, brick by brick, deal by deal, sleepless night after sleepless night. Daniel Harper had gone from a struggling mechanic's son to one of the most respected businessmen in the city. But with all his success came distance, from the small, quiet world where his heart truly belonged. From the people he once called family, from his daughter Lily. When Daniel lost his first wife Grace years earlier to illness, Lily was only 9. He promised her he'd always be there. But in chasing wealth to secure her future, he slowly disappeared from her present. At first it was just missed birthdays, then school events, then entire summers. He told himself it was for her, that money would make up for love. But in truth, he was building walls where there should have been bridges. When he finally remarried, it was more out of loneliness than love. His new wife, Victoria, was elegant, intelligent, and charming, but there was always a chill behind her perfect smile. Lily, by then 17, never warmed to her. Daniel hoped that time would soften things between them. He never noticed how quickly Victoria began taking control of the household, how Lily's laughter faded from the hallways, or how silence became the only sound at dinner. One evening, Daniel was away on a week-long business trip overseas. He had left his phone behind by mistake, an old habit of disconnecting to think clearly before big deals. He didn't know that while he was gone, something dark was brewing at home. When his plane touched down early that Sunday morning, he decided to surprise his family. He wanted to see his daughter smile, to make up for the long absences, to start being a father again. But as his car pulled into the long driveway of his mansion, something inside him felt wrong. The house was unusually quiet. No music, no laughter, no warmth, just stillness. He walked through the open door and saw the living room filled with black fabrics, candles, and lilies, his daughter's favorite flowers. At the center of the room was a large framed photograph of Lily, surrounded by wreaths, and beside it, his wife, Victoria, dressed in mourning black, speaking to a man about funeral arrangements. Daniel's world froze. The sound of his heartbeat echoed in his ears as he tried to understand. Why would there be a funeral? Why his daughter's picture? Why hadn't anyone called him? He couldn't move. It was as if time had shattered, leaving only disbelief. Then Victoria turned. The surprise on her face wasn't sorrow, it was fear. A flicker of panic that told him one terrible truth. Something was very, very wrong. Later that day, after the chaos and confusion had spilled into silence, Daniel learned what had happened, or rather, what was said to have happened. Victoria claimed that Lily had gone missing 3 days earlier. She said the police had found evidence suggesting an accident, that Lily's car had been discovered near a cliffside with her phone and shoes beside it. No body had been recovered, but Victoria had insisted on holding a funeral to begin healing. But nothing about it made sense. No one had informed Daniel. No police had tried to reach him through his office, his staff, or his business partners. He knew then that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a cover-up. Driven by a father's terror, Daniel began his own search. He retraced every step, spoke to Lily's friends, teachers, and anyone who might have seen her last. Days passed with no word. Each night he would sit in her empty room, holding her childhood drawings, remembering the promises he broke, and whispering silent apologies to the walls that once echoed with her laughter. But the truth has a way of surfacing when love refuses to give up. One night, a call came from an old employee, a gardener who had worked at Daniel's estate before Victoria fired him abruptly. He said he'd seen something strange before leaving, a heated argument between Victoria and Lily, and then a car leaving the property late at night, driven not by Lily, but by Victoria herself. That was all Daniel needed. He went to the authorities himself, showing evidence, security footage, and messages that Victoria had tried to erase. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed a horrifying picture. Victoria had been secretly transferring Daniel's money into hidden accounts, preparing to leave him, and Lily had discovered it. When Lily confronted her, she became a threat. So Victoria had staged an accident, but the truth didn't end there. Lily wasn't dead. She had escaped that night terrified, running into the woods near the estate. Injured and alone, she was found days later by an elderly couple in a nearby village. She'd been too frightened to return, too unsure if anyone would believe her, especially the father who had been absent for so long. When Daniel finally saw her again, she looked fragile, but alive. Tears blurred his vision as he held her for the first time in months, realizing how close he'd come to losing her forever. Not to death, but to his own blindness. The investigation that followed was swift. Victoria was arrested for fraud and attempted harm. Her mask of elegance crumbled in the courtroom as the truth unfolded. But for Daniel, justice brought no joy, only reflection. He saw how easily love can fade when replaced by ambition, how silence can be as cruel as betrayal, and how the people we take for granted often need nothing from us but time, attention, and care. The mansion that once shone with wealth became a quiet home again, not cold, not empty, but peaceful. Daniel stepped away from his business empire. He sold his luxury cars, his companies, and most of his estates, choosing instead to move with Lily into a small coastal town where no one called him Sir. There, he began again, not as a millionaire but as a father learning how to love. They spent mornings walking by the ocean, talking about life, forgiveness, and the years they had lost. Lily slowly learned to trust again. Daniel learned to listen. Sometimes healing doesn't come through grand gestures. It comes through small, quiet moments where hearts relearn how to beat together. Years later, when people in that small town would see the humble man fixing boats at the harbor with his grown daughter by his side, they never guessed he was once one of the richest men in the city. They only saw kindness in his eyes, the kind that comes from losing everything and finding what truly matters. Because in the end, Daniel realized something most never do until it's too late. You can rebuild an empire, but you can never rebuild a lost moment with someone you love. We often chase success believing it will protect the ones we love, yet the greatest protection is presence. Money can buy comfort, but it can't buy time, trust, or peace. Never let ambition silence love, because no amount of wealth can replace a single heartbeat of someone who truly cares for you.